I could almost laugh because the topic of my sermon is ready or not. And I'm stood here right now, and my sermon has only just arrived in that backpack.
Don't worry, we're
So it's one of those things like when you teach, actually you learn the most, and then also I feel like, yeah, it's funny, like God must be also grinning at me because he's like, I'm going to make you learn this lesson. If you're going to talk about it, you better learn it yourself. So here we go. My sermon has only just landed. My fault for leaving it in the backpack, but yeah, the sermon's called Ready or Not, and so the main message is essentially that there's a difference between being ready, and it does not mean being perfect. It means being sincere enough to listen to your conscience and to answer heaven's call and take the next step. So life does not ask if you feel ready before it carries on. Life carries on and doesn't wait for anyone. And so today I want to speak about being ready, or more honestly speaking, about not feeling ready. So life doesn't wait for us to feel prepared. Being an adult adulthood doesn't ask you whether you're ready. Marriage doesn't ask you if you're ready. Parenthood. And our children definitely don't check if we're ready before they push us. So life presents many questions, and somehow we have to find our best answer. So preparation is good, I have to say that first, and which is ironic because I'm late to deliver the sermon because my sermon was in the backpack. So preparation is good. My preparation needs to be better, clearly. But the concern is that sometimes preparation can become a hiding place. And I'm not against preparation. And we should learn, we should reflect, we should pray, train. We should make responsible plans. But sometimes preparation becomes kind of a sneaky way of avoidance. And so we can easily tell ourselves, once I understand this, or once I overcome these weaknesses, or once I feel confident, then I'll act. But, what happens when this once doesn't actually arrive? Reminds me of a conversation I had with Ramika recently. So Ramika, if you don't know, she's an illustrator, and she cares very much about the quality of her work, and she's very educated in this way, and she has a high standard, and she wants her work to meet that standard, and that desire is from a good place. But she told me the other day that because of that, she feels a bit hesitant to actually create something. So she almost can't pick up the pen or the brush and start because she wants it to reach a high standard, and it prevents her even actually creating something. And the conclusion was that actually better that I create something that's not perfect, that I don't create at all, that all this creativity stays inside and doesn't come out. So it became, instead of doing that, it's like make something, learn from it, and then make the next thing. And letting go of the expectation that every piece must already be like the very best it could be. There's a common expression that I think was made popular by the philosopher Voltaire. He said, "The perfect is the enemy of the good." So this whole idea of perfection really has done some damage. So this doesn't obviously mean being careless, but it means the demand for a perfect result can sometimes prevent a good and a necessary beginning. So you could say that perfection may be a direction for the growth, but it cannot be the entrance requirement. It cannot be the toll you have to pay to start. It's more like a direction. So one thing that's very relevant here is that fear is often bigger beforehand. Before the thing actually happens, the fear is bigger than the reality. And it's always exaggerated, right? So obviously stuff like standing up here can seem extremely nerve-wracking, but once it begins, and there's many examples that once you actually make a start, it's like, I didn't die, it was actually okay. And but before we do, then we're thinking about embarrassment, rejection, failure, not being able to cope, everything going wrong. And normally reality doesn't actually track with that, fortunately. And and then once it actually begins, then our imagination can start to get going, and we can stop, instead of predicting, we can start responding and kind of going with the flow. So it's just once things start, it's always much easier. One moment follows another, and it becomes manageable. So the fear of an experience is often much larger than the experience itself. And the fear is very vague and very big, but so perhaps the main points I want to make today is that, to me, I would say that readiness is actually sincerity. And I think especially in a spiritual way, like before heaven, readiness is mostly about sincerity. I don't know who said sincerity can move mountains. Was that a True Father quote? Maybe that was someone else. Maybe that's prayer. I don't know. But being ready doesn't mean to have no weaknesses or to have no fear or to know exactly what's going to happen, or even being certain that it's going to work. It means actually sincerely wanting to find God, really wanting to make God happy, listening to your conscience. That takes practice. And offering what you do have to give, and taking the next step despite feeling fearful. And so, effectively, I'd say in every given situation, following your conscience is the main thing. And I don't know, I guess most of you were either here or have seen Junka's testimony from a little bit ago, but she was sharing her journey about finding her own faith in God, because she looked at her parents' example and then how people were treating her, and then stuff started to fall into place in her mind, but she wanted her own faith, and her conscience was basically guiding her. And then it was effectively, her attitude was like, I will find you, God. Like everything she was doing, like, I'm going to find you. And so every 100K Sunday service, workshop, that was like the overriding goal, the prime directive. And long story short, and you should watch it if you've not seen it on the YouTube channel, that sincerity led to a really powerful experience of God's heart. And that was like really authentic and real. It was like God's hope, but in God's pain, of course. We talk a lot about God's pain. It seems to be a hot topic, but also God's real hope. And so that was basically the fruit of keeping on listening to the conscience and taking those next steps. And yeah, that led to her being here and his team being here. And even though when speaking to your brother, and he was talking about it being really tough, and basically, there was quite a background of like, well, this is a big deal, and it could easily have turned into fear. But because of this experience, then even with all the unknown and like what of this different country and like the different challenges, her determination was to like, despite all that unknown, I'm going to do it, and no matter what happens. And that's effectively the recipe. And also with AJ's testimony, it was also like a leap of faith, because you were in a Muslim household, but you felt drawn to Christianity, and you were kind of also in seeking mode. And so, it would be easy for someone to be like, for the sake of convenience, I'm gonna just, stay in this lane and stay at home in a stable situation and stuff. But if I understand correctly, you effectively had to leave your home to continue to pursue where your conscience was directing you. So that that's obviously a massive unknown. It's like a huge leap, and because of following the conscience, and it had an actual cost. And so yeah, that was like also illustration of sincerity and leading to quite a massive change. And yeah, lots of people in our community that were taking these kinds of leaps. And it's not because we feel ready. It's kind of like your conscience and reality presents you with these questions, and then in those quiet moments, your conscience speaks and like, I'm going to do this. And oftentimes it's like, ooh, really? What are the other options? But when you hear it and you believe it, then you go. And even though you don't know exactly how the dice are going to land, so it's not because you can know the outcome really. Yeah. So yeah, it's also related to this. I was studying a bit of the Bible, and to me it was kind of a passage that illustrated this idea of it's very easy to feel unworthy or unprepared and unready. And one of the moments in the Bible that illustrated that was with Isaiah. And so effectively, in the case of Isaiah, it was a period where there was a huge amount of change happening. This king that had been there for a long time had died. So it was kind of like a new reign, this King Uzziah. And it was a big time of uncertainty for the nation and for the region. And then in that moment, Isaiah had a vision, and he saw God. He says, the Lord seated high upon a throne, and there were heavenly beings around him, like angels maybe, but it says heavenly beings, and they're going, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. So they are kind of proclaiming the Lord in this transition time. But Isaiah's reaction was kind of fear. He was like, oh my God, I'm ruined. Like, he felt so inadequate in that vision. And he says, woe to me. And then he's really panicking. He says, I am a man of unclean lips. I don't know if that means like he gossips or something, but he felt unworthy. And, God didn't say like, okay, go work on yourself, come back. God basically one of the seraphim, so that's like a kind of angel, takes a burning coal and goes and puts it on his lips. And it's a cleansing experience, and he's told that his guilt has been taken away and his sin is atoned for, and it's a fresh slate. So it's like a chance to start again. So he felt totally unworthy, but he wasn't turned away. And then God is asking about, in this void and in this time of great change, he needed people to go and to share about him and teach about God. And he said, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" So it sounds super like witnessing. Well, he is witnessing. And after his cleansing experience, he says, "Here am I, send me." So he's like the only guy. So he's going to go solo into this place, and he doesn't know the outcome, but his conscience called him, God called him. So the sequence matters. Is like, firstly, Isaiah encounters God. Secondly, he recognizes his limitations. Then God's grace purifies him. Then God presents the mission, and then he takes on the mission, and he makes himself available. So his readiness was not about being perfect. It was being honestly humble, being open to God's grace, and willing to answer the call. So he was not like, "Here I am because I'm the best qualified person." Like, you never hear that. Actually, if you study Central people in the Providence, they don't really look like they have the best CV. They look all very flawed. They might have a speech impediment or like anger issue, or they might be like a tax collector or anyway, like they don't look like superheroes. They look like very normal people. So to me, sincerity is not pretending that we have no flaws, but it's bringing the flaws to God and then going. And there's also the example of Jonah. God called Jonah to also go witness in Nineveh. And it's like a really kind of shady place, like it's known for its sin and stuff. And to go and proclaim God's warning. But Jonah was like, nope, he did not want to. And the funny thing I didn't know was that it wasn't because he was scared. It was actually because he had a bit of a beef with Nineveh. He did not like Nineveh. He knew that if he went and witnessed in Nineveh, some would accept it and some would be saved. But in his mind, he was like, screw this town. I hate these people. And I don't want them to be saved. I didn't realize that until I was checking. And I mean, this is obviously a lesson that we can take in terms of also not judging, for example, a city or a nation or something. There's lots of people have a lot of judgment for this nation and others. And you should reflect on that. Like, try to love this nation. Like, I hear some people very close to me as well. They're telling me all about what's wrong with the UK and what's wrong with the US, which I was born there. I'm American, and but you have to love these places. Really try to love these places, because God does. God loves the people there, and so don't be judgmental either. But he didn't go. He went in the exact opposite direction. He got on the boat to go as far away from that place as possible. And funny thing is that he actually, it comes out in conversation that he's running away from God. Right. And the sailors were like, what? And then they were outraged and they threw him in the sea. I forgot that part as well. So they basically like, the hell are you doing? Like, maybe they thought that if they had such a guy that literally directly goes against God, it would be cursed on the boat. So they were like, ooh, and chucked him in. Yeah. And then as we know, he was inside the belly of the whale, which later people interpreting like as a metaphor for depression could be and that kind of thing. And he was there 3 days and 3 nights. But from there, then he could repent and he could have his new opportunity. And he did go to Nineveh and he did give the message. And yeah, so it was a struggle between his own will and God's will, and his conscience and his like avoidance. And he tried to rationalize it, and yeah, but he was really in an obvious way escaping God's will. But I think we can also be cautious of the more subtle ways that we're maybe doing a similar thing. As I was mentioning before, like maybe it's even an unconscious thing, but when we're just doing endless preparation and we're just delaying things a bit more. I tried to delay the sermon, but I tried this procrastination. There's something called analysis paralysis. People that like they just go deep into research and stuff, but they never actually do it. The perfect workout, but never go in the gym, and diet and everything. So promising to act. Once this thing, then I'll do this thing. And sometimes preparation is genuine, like there's a real intent to do it, but oftentimes it's not. So, yeah, it's very human. And actually, True Father had a similar thing when, if you recall, True Father was there on Easter morning. He was a teenager, he was 15, so he's like GCSEs. And he was in deep prayer in the mountains. And then that's when Jesus appeared to him and asked him to continue God's work. And that's a lot for a 15-year-old. It's a lot for anyone. But initially he said no. He's like, how can I do that as someone else? I'm not qualified. But I think he knew, and God knew, and Jesus knew he was the guy in this moment, and this was his calling. And so, of course, True Father accepted. But initially he didn't. Initially he was like, whoa, this is too much. And so it happens to the very best of us. So don't feel bad if, this has been you. Yeah. Yeah, so courage doesn't mean that there's no fear. In fact, you could almost argue that fear has to be there for it to actually be bravery. Yeah. It's not really bravery if you're not afraid. Yeah. Fear is not an indication that it's not the right thing to do. And if I share briefly about my own kind of Jonah moment, it was also one of these kind of preparation things. So I was getting to I was in my 20s, and as a unificationist, the question is always rising, like, oh, what about matching? What about blessing? And I have Dale is a big part of this story, because when he came and then he was pastor for our community, then of course he was broaching the topic and he was asking me, and so it felt like a certain amount of pressure, and life was asking me this question. But then I remember I was even justifying it in terms of True Father's words, because I had read that if you take a period of 3 years, you can totally transform your character. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, 3 years is a good amount of time. I'm going to submit this as my reason that I'm not going to the matching this year. And then, I'm going to super prepare myself and be like a crazy, amazing husband material. And he kept asking every year, and then it kept, oh, no, not quite there yet. And, but then, also, honestly speaking, it was an excuse. I knew this. And my preparation was sincere, but maybe it wasn't, maybe it was going a bit slow. But then certain opportunities, because God didn't let me escape, God kind of provided opportunities, God through Dale. And so, as I've told you many times already, I'm a very introverted person, and I'd very much made up my mind, I'm never going to do this SDF thing. I'm never going to go out. Fundraising is like, it was already decided. I was like, heck no, I'm not doing it. But at the same time, I've grown up hearing stories from my parents, from other people's parents, about the amazing things that do happen when you are on the front line, so to speak, and you fundraise and you witness. And that's very character building. My mum is very introverted too, and she did it for many years, and I think her witnessing name was Susan. And but yeah, opportunities came because of Dale's background with STF, which is like Empower, was like Empower. There's like, we did a fundraising condition in Scotland, and again, like the fear was massive, but then the reality was actually, it was an amazing time. That led on to like fundraising and witnessing in Albania, and later I actually did even get involved with SDF. An SDF team came to Manchester even, and I spent half the weeks there. But these were things I was like, I thought I'd never ever do. I'd avoid them like the plague. But it happened, and my conscience, because it was like not, it was inescapable. Like SDF is a thing out there. It's like Empower. It's a program out there. It's kind of like it's in Europe or something. But here I was in Manchester, and it's like SDF are here in Manchester, and like also our community was doing this thing in Scotland and then doing this thing in Albania. So when something's right there in front of your face, I guess you can be like, but like my conscience wouldn't let me. So, and yeah. So I knew I would grow. I knew that like that was the express way to growth, especially given my character. But yeah, doing this and challenging myself and overcoming, the other thing that started to dawn on me was that question about being ready for the matching. And yeah, already I'd started to realize it's not really about preparation. You know, readiness actually means sincerity, and especially in the face of uncertainty. Like you go out witnessing and fundraising, you don't know what's going to happen. But it's actually the same thing with matching, you know. So all I knew is that I wanted to make God happy. I remember like a tearful conversation with Dad. You know, I want to love someone. I don't feel worthy to do that, but I had a strong desire that I wanted to love someone. I wanted to make God happy, and I knew that God would want. I knew God wanted it, and I knew I wanted it. So, yeah. So it didn't mean that my growth was complete. Yeah. So that's why I did. You know, based on that foundation, I did. It's a story for another time, but you know, then I did go the way of the matching, and then God very obviously made things happen. It was amazing. So, so one thing I want to talk about as well, I'm going too slow, and so I'm not going to get through this, is this concept. It's called the do something principle, and it's basically targeted at our ideas about motivation, and that we have like this assumption that normally it goes something like, before you act, it's inspiration leads to motivation. You watch a YouTube video or something, leads to action. But and it's like, once I feel motivated, I'll act. And sometimes that can happen, but a lot of the time it doesn't. And an alternative was this thing that someone coined as the do something principle. So it's more like you do something small, you have an actual real experience, you get a bit more confidence, you have a bit more motivation, and then you do the next thing. So that's actually how it works. So it has to begin actually with action. Action is not the result of motivation. Action can create motivation. And a small step gives us like actual real life info that we can use as well. And yeah, we always realized that the task was not as terrible as we thought it would be, that we can survive the discomfort, that we can do more than we expected. And the movement is like give and take. It creates energy. So, if you flipped it, it would be like the fear cycle would be imagining the task, fearing about it, avoid it, and then there's like no experience, and then it's kind of, you can get in the opposite loop. So, yeah. And, yeah, it could also be conscience, and then a sincere step, and then an experience, like a glimpse of God, and then your faith gets stronger, and then the courage, and then it can also loop like that. And, yeah, so it's like same thing as waiting before you have a really strong faith before you act. It also doesn't really work. So, and yeah, so the idea is to do what you believe is right, but then you need to actually be brave enough to let go of the actual outcome. And this is a very kind of Eastern philosophy, is about detachment from the actual outcome. So, we can choose our intention, our effort, our honesty, our response, and what values that we act on, but you can't control, other people out there or the circumstances and the outcome. So, and so it's a really old idea in the East. And in the Bhagavad Gita, so Hinduism, it teaches about action but without being attached to what's the fruits of the action. And in Taoism, there's this thing called Wu Wei, and it's not really about like passiveness, but it's acting. You do the right thing, but it's not about forcing things to happen. And so, a Christian might say, you make a faithful offering, and then the result is in God's hands, and to let go in that way. Yeah. And it reminds me, so there's this kind of what do you call it? When there's like a proverb? Like there's a short story of Sai Wang. So it's a Chinese story. And he lived out in the frontier, and he was raising horses. And one day one of his best horses ran away, and his neighbors came up to him and he said like, "Oh, what terrible bad fortune." And then he was like, "We'll see." And then after a while, the horse, it actually comes back, and it brings an even better horse with it. And it brings a friend. And the neighbor's like, "Whoa, incredible good fortune." And then he's like, "We'll see." And then his son goes to take the new horse for a test ride, and he gets kicked off it, and he like badly breaks his leg. And of course, you guess what the neighbors say? "Oh, terrible fortune." And then again, he's like, "Maybe." And then soon afterwards, the emperor's army comes recruiting, conscripting people, and they're taking every able-bodied young man. Yeah. And it's a terrible war. It's like basically certain death. And but because his son injury, he's like, "We don't take him because he's hurt." So it's the kind of thing like you. And there's been times in my life that actually, if things went the way I intended, I'm so glad some things that I had in my head didn't pan out that way. Right. And on the flip side, there's some things that I was like, "Oh, this failed," or whatever, but I actually am so glad that I didn't go that way, and I went this way kind of by accident only. So that's kind of my point, is that you actually don't know what's going to happen to you, or what questions life is going to ask for you. And one person in one book, I think, is great about this, and I think someone may have even mentioned it. But there's this person, a psychiatrist, Austrian, called Viktor Frankl, and he was a Holocaust survivor. He was in a Nazi concentration camp. His wife, his parents were killed. but he did survive this concentration camp, and then he wrote a really famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he used it to develop his own kind of brand of psychology. It's called logotherapy. And so he didn't pretend like optimism means like everything will go fine, you're not going to die. The camps were terrible places and lots of people died. But his point was that in any actual situation, your external freedom can be taken away, but your spirit can actually always be free, and the attitude you take can always be. You can always have that freedom to choose your attitude. And he witnessed crazy things in the concentration camps. The fellow prisoners were comforting each other, and they were giving away their last scrap of bread. That's also very true, Father. That's also very Hungnam. And they couldn't control anything about the camp, but they could still decide whether to comfort people or just survive themselves, to share their things, to be compassionate, and what kind of person they were going to be, even in that situation. And so one of the quotes from Frankl is, "The last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." And also that concept that we might go through life and periodically be like, why is this happening? Well, what are you. But sorry to say, but you don't ask the questions. Life asks the questions, you answer. So he said also that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expects from us. And he said basically that was his same philosophy, like it's about right action and conduct, and then the result will be whatever it will be. And then to go more into so True Father was at Hungnam, which was a labor camp. It was basically a place that people were sent to die, and they were sent under the guise of like, they're working, but they were there so that they would slowly die. And so everyone was underfed, made to do really hard work, carrying like fertilizer, and it was very uncertain that he would survive. And so True Father, he had no control of this external environment, and he couldn't leave, he couldn't, ask you like, hey, treat me more nicely. But he still chose, he was very disciplined, he even still exercised. He had his way of wiping the chemicals off him so it wouldn't be as harmful. And he was always praying, he was sharing his food. He got extra food because he was the best worker, but he just gave it away. And he was helping other prisoners, and he would never pray for his own, like being rescued. He would always pray for others. And he was trying to, in fact, comfort God in that time. And then he'd often ask himself the question, like, what does he love more? What would he love more, like a piece of bread or God? That's how he kept refocusing himself. And so that's kind of what I want to emphasize, is that no matter what the circumstance, you can choose your attitude and how you're going to go about it, how you're going to meet those questions. And I think one easy thing you can do, or not easy but simple, works in all situations, is to try and practice gratitude. And that takes training. So, it doesn't mean that there's no injustice or grief or disappointment and stuff, but you can always try and practice gratitude. And the reason why it's possible to do in every situation is you can even do it for situations that haven't happened yet. So it's even in the Bible, there's a precedent about, in Mark, it says, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you've already received it and it will be yours. So you can really, if you can, this is where imagination comes in again, but if you can be grateful for even something that you want to receive that you've not received yet, then this is, some people have heard of this law of attraction idea and stuff. It's same, it's in the Bible, so it's not just New Age and woo. So, gratitude is possible in every situation. And, yeah. So, but the point, like I say, is that you can't wait, you can't endlessly prepare, and it's not what God wants of you. God doesn't want you to just prepare and train. God wants you to do, before you're fully ready. And even in Genesis, God said to Abraham, he said, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless. So it's go, try, do your best. And in the part about be blameless, he'd be yeah, you're going to mess up. The results will vary a lot, but I'll not blame you. You tried, you followed your conscience. Yeah. But that's the main point, is walk before me, not so in front of me. So it's go. It's a parent. It's come. Oh, you fell down. Yeah, it happens. Yeah. Get up again. So he wasn't, Abraham, when you study the Bible, he was one of those very flawed people as well. He's really not necessarily prepared. He relied on people a lot, his family and his friends. And so, yeah, it's not being super self-sufficient and then you can go. And, yeah, so if I just skim through the main points of what I've said, it would be, so in terms of fear, it's often way inflated before the event itself. But when you take action, then, you replace that imagination with actual reality, and reality is always way less scary. And, Isaiah taught us that even with all his flaws, he was still the one that said, it's me. I'm the guy, send me. And, Jonah literally ran away as far as he could. God still called him again. And, true father, you could say he also had this moment, this human moment that he was oh, too much, and he didn't actually want to do it. And, yeah. So, and we can take inspiration from True Father, from all these biblical figures, from Junker, from AJ, from our brothers and sisters. And so the question is not that, am I completely ready? It's about, are you sincere, in your heart? So those are my final words. It's just, don't wait for perfection. Listen to your conscience and be brave and just take those steps. So, yeah, thank you.